This is Detroit. You've probably read how Detroit is doing better since bankruptcy. And for the central business districts, it really is. But that's not the whole story. There are people in the neighborhoods of Detroit who are still struggling. As the city went through the bankruptcy process, a group of foundations approached nonprofit media and ethnic newspapers to see if they'd work together to ensure better coverage, especially in the neighborhoods. The idea was collaboration would make all journalism a little stronger. So the online magazine Bridge, Detroit Public TV, WDET, Michigan Radio, and New Michigan Media agreed to work together. Their reporters have been covering the city since the bankruptcy. In 2016, the Detroit Journalism Cooperative decided to look back to better understand where we are today. As Winston Churchill said, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. We decided to look at 1967. As just about anybody in Michigan could tell you, that was the year Detroit exploded. There were many civil disturbances across the nation that year, but Detroit's was the worst. 43 people died, more than 1,000 people were injured, and parts of the city were burned to the ground. You know, 1967 is blamed for the decline of Detroit. It's just not true. The city had already been declining for 2 decades. Jobs were down, white people had been moving to the suburbs, the tax base was falling short, but in the wake of 1967, a lot more people, most of them white, left. There's been a lot of coverage of the 1967 violence. There's been less coverage of why it happened or what happened afterward. President Lyndon Johnson appointed a commission to discover the causes of that civil disturbance in Detroit and many other cities that year. The Kerner Commission reported back early in 1968. It found African Americans had a lot of grievances. They were being discriminated against in many ways. They didn't get the same employment opportunities. Housing for black people was inferior. Relationships with police were strained. The Kerner Commission outlined remedies. The politicians of the day did very little to solve the problems. Today, many of those same problems exist, and in some cases in Detroit, things are even worse. The Detroit Journalism Cooperative reporters have been looking at the grievances outlined in the Kerner report and looking at the situations on the ground today. Reporters looked at attitudes about race, police relationships in Detroit and with people of color in today's America. We looked at new groups springing up to voice concerns of minorities. We looked at housing, education, jobs, and the justice system. While there have been some improvements in some areas in the last 50 years, it's nowhere near what the members of the Kerner Commission recommended. The stories the reporters of the Detroit Journalism Cooperative compiled have been published and broadcast. They're also gathered online at detroitjournalism.org in a collection called The Intersection. As the 50th anniversary of 1967 and the civil disturbances that shook the nation to the core are noted, we hope you'll take a look at what's been done to remedy the problems and what's left to do.